Namoa, hi everyone. So welcome to the Creative Leadership Series, where we interview remarkable individuals from across the world on matters relating to creativity and leadership. Navigating ourselves into a better future requires creative leadership. The courage to create a future worth living into and to lead through times of uncertainty. And this series of conversations explores creativity and leadership at a deeper level. My name's Dr. Rishi Handa, and I'm truly honored to welcome two very distinguished guests. We have here with us Bhavna Roy, who is the elder sister of the well-known author Amish Tripathi. Amish ji is, you'll have no doubt come across his numerous books, and is also the director of the Nehru Centre in London. So to both of yourselves, Namo Vam. Delighted to have you here. And how's both of you are in very different parts of the world. Amishji, I think in London, you're in the Nehru Centre as we speak, and Bhavnaji?
I'm in Mumbai right now.
Right, so it's great to have you. Thank you. Let's. I'm gonna go straight in. Let's talk firstly. Well, tell you what. Your latest book has come out. It's jointly authored, called Dharma, and I know you've had many. I'm going to be very just free and candid about things. So I know you've had many interviews, and so just so that you don't feel like you're repeating yourselves, because I know that could be feel a little monotonous. I want this to be quite engaging for yourselves in a different way. So we will we'll speak a little bit about the book, because I think it's very useful for our audience to know about the book. And from there, then we'll start dialoguing, we'll have conversations about concepts. Okay, well, it is titled Dharma, so I think the key thing we will discuss is Dharma itself. What I will ask you, though, before we get into the book is, ever since that book is done, are you writing anything more yet? Have you taken a break to promote this?
I mean, I'm a workaholic, and fortunately, as is Bhavna Didi. So of course, while promoting, we continue to write as well. So, and of course, Dharma has just been launched just 10 days back, a little more than 10 days back. But I am already working on the 4th book of the Ramchandra series, which I'm hoping to release by the end of this year. And Bhavna Di and I have already started our next project as well, which we also hope to release this year. So we are productive workaholics.
Good.
This besides, of course, the work that we keep doing, my Nehru Centre work and Bhavna Di with her work.
Obviously, I'm guessing for the both of you, because normally, I mean, I lead quite a busy life, and the idea of writing becomes very difficult for me at the moment. For yourselves, I can imagine, as busy people, you'd have to juggle this. But I'm also guessing that during lockdown, of course, this just provides you a brilliant time to be able to put pen to paper.
Right.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true. Very true. Bhavna Di, if you wanna.
To begin with, Rishi, as we all have experienced conversations with parents and their children. Parents never tire of talking about their children. This this book of ours,
yes,
is our child. So we wouldn't tire of talking about it.
No.
The second part, which is work that you were talking about, honestly, work is very, very valuable in life. Work keeps you centered. Work keeps you disciplined. Work keeps us rhythmic in life. And I would go so far as to say that if you do not have work at a stage in your life, you must generate work. Empty shelves and clean them up and put them back, put the stuff back. It's good for you. It's good for your soul. It's good for your body. It's good for your emotions. It's good for your money.
Very much. In fact, yesterday somebody said to me, well, if you're at home, because I'm teaching from home, I'm a teacher, so I've had one of my friends said to me yesterday, "You must be quite bored then at home." I said, "Last time I used the word bored when I was 17, pre-internet days. In this day and age, it's almost sacrilegious to use the word bored. It's just never. There aren't enough lifetimes, of course, to be able to learn things, to write things, to do productive things." Right, your book, so Dharma. I'm going to leave this open because I just want you to feel free to just converse. Could I it'd be nice if you could just share just an overview of what the book is about. So again, I'll leave it to whoever would like to answer whatever questions.
Sure. The dharma is a word that is not unknown to those of us who are from the Indian subcontinent, regardless of religion or language group or community group, whatever. Whichever group you're from, dharma as a word, you would know. But often the understanding of the word may not be whole and complete. Very often, dharma is erroneously translated as religion, which it's not. That's the first thing that should be clarified. Dharma doesn't mean religion. In fact, dharma is beyond religion. Dharma is above religion. The Sanskrit word for religion would be panth, not dharma. Panth can have, some do's, some don'ts. Dharma is above that. Dharma is beyond that. And at least the dharmic religions, which is Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, subscribe to this concept where dharmic religions are different from other religions. Is that it is dharma is driven by wisdom, whereas other religions are driven by faith. Faith is not so important in dharma. You can have faith or you may not have faith. It's not important. That's your personal choice, right? Whereas in the religions which are driven by faith, that is the most critical thing. You have to believe in, the one male God. Otherwise, you'll go to hell. That's not so important in the dharmic religions. So therefore, then the question that arises, and this is something our ancestors have grappled with for millennia. What is dharma, right? Because only when we understand that can we actually lead our life well. The Sanskrit root at the heart of the word dharma is dhru, that which holds together, that which balances, that which binds. That is dharma, and that which unbalances, which breaks up, that is adharma, right? Now, how this translates into and dharma is something that applies not just on human beings. It applies on everything. It applies on the entire universe, applies on plants, animals, everything, right? Then the key question that those who follow dharma always grapple with is what is dharma? Because remember the difference between the dharmic religions and the faith-driven religions. In the dharmic religions, you are treated like an adult. The faith religions, you are in a way a child who's looking up to a father, and a father says, do this is this, or don't do this is this. In the dharmic religions, the way is that you explore what makes sense to you, then make your choices and live with the consequences, positive or negative. That's how dharma works. So therefore, the most important question to answer is what is dharma? What are the various aspects of dharma? And there are ways to introduce you to it, which are our stories. That's what we try and do through this book. Now, if you were in ancient times in the Gurukuls, Pathshalas, you won't need this book because it will be a part of your education system. The modern education, we don't teach anything of this. So this book is an attempt to kind of introduce you to those who may be interested to these concepts. And essentially learnings from our epics and our stories. Learnings and lessons on dharma. Didi, if you want to add anything.
Oh, dharma really is quite the Scarlet Pimpernel among words. very difficult to pin down. We too are really searching and exploring and our wanderings through our books. Very, very difficult to understand what dharma is. Uh, not so intellectually unattainable. Dharma, after all, is connected to life, all living beings, and dharma is connected to the way a piece of life is meant to be. From the sun and the moon and the stars to the flowers and the stones and you and I, animals. It's about what we are meant to be. And how do we know we are moving in the direction of what we are meant to be? If we are moving closer and closer to a sense of harmony and positivity and inner calm, if we are moving towards more scatter, more disharmony, more inner noise, then clearly we're moving away from dharma. So there has to be an antennae-like, a signaling mechanism that we have to attune ourselves to and live consciously, live mindfully, and always be on guard with our own inner psychological drama.
Okay, what I find about something like the Mahabharata text is, and in fact, when it was dramatized on television, so you have the original, you have the one from the early 90s, which I remember watching, and then you have the one that was produced a few years ago, maybe about 5-6 years ago by Star Plus, I think it was. What I found the difference was in the more recent one is that the more recent one explored the idea of dharma a lot more in pragmatic ways. At every moment, and this is what I love about the Mahabharata as a text, at every moment there is a dharma dilemma. And there is this discussion happening about what is the right thing to do. Essentially, this begs the question then of what is the source of dharma? If you look at the tradition, the Shastric tradition, if you look at, for example, take the Manava Dharma Shastra, we have Vedo Khilo Dharma Moolam. So the entire Veda is the source of dharma. That is one level of things from a particular tradition. But we now have to navigate things because we don't have everybody sitting and picking up Veda or the entire body of works. We're functioning in a very unique time where we have, for the first time in history, we're living in, normally I look at it like this, that normally in history we've gone through certain cycles. But now, in more recent decades, we've entered a whole new way of living that has never happened before. And so we now have to really rework this. And that is, we're living in a world which is a lot more connected. We're living in a world with technology, with the media, with the internet. And so really the question is, what do we use to determine what dharma is for each of ourselves? And if I could, sorry, I won't speak for much longer because I do want to hear yourselves, but if we look at, say, pre-modern society, when you had villages, if we take villages, and perhaps even still today, if we take villages, in a sense, sociologists have at least theorized that individuals living within a wider framework, and we can look at families, we can look at extended families to understand this, to appreciate this. When we look at a wider framework, we have individuals not just choosing what they want to do, but essentially their role is decided by who they are in the village, in society, in their family. Now, in a modernist or a postmodern society, we've got a lot more freedom now because we're not accountable to the village. We're not accountable to the town. It's about our choices. So really go back to the question that I was asking, what is the source of dharma? How do we decide what we need to do?
Lots of things to unpack in your question. Let me try and address it through a few points. One, you did mention the Vedas, and the Vedas are very important. So at least the philosophies that Didi and I pursue, those are the Astic schools. And in the Indian way, Astic and Nastic is not about belief or lack of belief in the divine or God. Like I said, faith in God is not so important in the Indian way. Astic and Nastic, the important thing is, do you give primacy to the Vedas or do you not give primacy to the Vedas? Astic schools give primacy to the Vedas. Nastic schools don't. Right? Didi and I are from the Vedic schools, but there are equally respected Nastic schools as well, in India. And one of the things, even those of us who do respect the Vedas will clearly say that, look, the Vedas are called Shruti, which means that which was heard by our rishis and rishikas, by male and female rishis, which means they sourced it from the divine. But even we say that we are in fact encouraged to question everything, right? So to say that the root of dharma is the Vedas itself would be partially true, not the whole truth, because dharma essentially came from creation itself. It was even above the Vedas, right? The Vedas was an attempt by rishis and rishikas to understand dharma. So we have to understand dharma essentially comes. Now, this is a kind of metaphysical thing. It's not something that can be applied in real life right now. But at least that's what we Indians believe, that dharma comes from creation itself. It is at the heart of everything, right? Then the question that arises, as you said rightly, how do we apply it in our lives? And how do we decide what our dharma is? Among the philosophies that are very clear, that's there in both the Nastic and the Astic schools, is there are various levels of, at least most of them, there are various levels of dharma, right? There is the Sanatan Dharma, there's the Yuga Dharma, there's the Kula Dharma, and then there is our Swadharma. Now, no one has the right to tell us what our Swadharma should be. Only we can decide what our Swadharma should be, and we have to live in consonance with our Swadharma and accept the consequences of it. It is our choice, right? So if someone is forcing you into a path, Swadharma, the English word, closest English word would be purpose, right? Your purpose in life. Someone is forcing you to do something that is not your purpose. It is your duty to stand up, right? Shreya Swadharma Vigunaha Paradharma Swanushtutat. It is better if I do my own Swadharma, even while making mistakes in doing, rather than doing someone else's Swadharma, even if I do it perfectly. But realize that the choice is yours. You have to follow it and then live with the consequences, right? Positive or negative. That is what dharma is. Now, is there a positive? And again, things are nuanced and complex. Is there a benefit to the individualistic Western society that you can follow your purpose more clearly? Yes. But is there a challenge of the breakdown of many traditions, sense of community, sense of family, as you see in the West? I mean, I was reading a statistic that more than half of recently born children in many Western countries are born out of wedlock. They're brought up by a single parent who probably is struggling to earn money. What is the kind of upbringing that child receives? Now, is that good for society? Is that good for the child? So is excess individualism not good? No, these are things which, if you're dharmic, you will think about, because it is always about balance. One extreme where the village controls every aspect of your life is not good. But the other extreme where you've destroyed all traditions, all sense of community, all sense of family, you're a lone ranger, that's also not good. One of the reasons I believe Eastern societies are doing better in the COVID pandemic than the Western societies is, I mean, look, we are poorer countries. We don't have that much state capacity. We don't have money, but our societies are anti-fragile because we have a sense of community. We have a sense of tradition. In India, you are not alone. There's a downside to it. Your neighbors will keep interfering in your life. There's a downside to it. But the upside, in a time like COVID, you are not alone. In Western society, why are death rates so high in Western societies of COVID? I mean, could it be that because the state can't be there everywhere? This modern thing that we have, which is more, a left liberal thing, that the state has to manage everything. The kind of state you'll have to build for that will be a very scary and intrusive state. Do we really want that? Right? Society has to be stronger. And for society to be strong, you need some traditions. You need a sense of community. Again, balance. Don't swing on either extreme. That is what Dharma is about. Ati sarvatra varjayit. Extremism of any kind should be avoided. Dharma is in balance.
A lot to think about there. Bhavnaji, anything to add to your perspective?
You asked about the source of dharma. I would break it down into two components: knowledge to experience, and from experience to knowledge. Knowledge to experience is the nigamic route. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad talks about neti neti. It's a shedding mechanism. Who am I? I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not that, I'm not that, I'm not that, I'm not that. You keep shedding, and anything that is and is has to be shed. And if there is that, if you realize that nothingness, if from that knowledge of neti neti, you realize the experience of nothingness, you've reached dharma. That's one approach, knowledge to experience, the nigamic approach. The other approach is the agamic approach, from experience to knowledge. Abhinav Gupta's Tantra Lok. From experience to knowledge, I would contextualize it within our Purusharthas. There is Dharma, Artha, Kam and Moksha. Now, if Artha and Kam, which if I were to associate it with Kathopanishad's prayas, pleasure, if Artha and Kam are at one end, scaffolded by dharma, which I would
Didi, just one sec. Didi, just one sec. Just in case people don't understand the Sanskrit words, artha means wealth, power. I mean, traditional translation is wealth, but wealth, power, everything, all those associated. And kama is all the erotic pleasures of life, music, dance, everything, right? So these two. Sorry, Didi, carry on.
I'm sorry, I should have specified that. Rishi, is a Sanskrit scholar, and here I'm sitting. This is the thing with social media.
No, I'm talking about because the audience may not know. So
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So what I'm saying is, this is the thing with social media, because social media today has given us a sense of, it is as if I'm talking to myself, and I'm also talking to the whole world at the same time. So it can be bewildering for an old woman like me. So I'm gonna rewind, and yes, Arth is the economic wheel, and Kam is the desires, the wants, that wheel. Both of them, if I were to associate it with the Kathopanishad concept of prayas, which is pleasure. And on one side, if it is scaffolded by dharma, which I would associate with the Kathopanishad's concept of shreyas, which is goodness. So if dharma, which I am very simplistically calling goodness, if that becomes the foundation upon which we build artha and kam, which is the pleasing, the realization, the other end of the scaffold is moksha, which is self-realization. Now, this purusharthic approach to realizing dharma is from experience to knowledge. It is the other way around. So both streams are available. We may choose the ascetic or the grihastha path.
In our day-to-day lives, let me see how to phrase this. In our day-to-day lives, in the modern world, we are in positions where we take on employment, and we like to enjoy our jobs.
Mm.
And if we don't, then what happens? People then look towards um, changing their profession or changing their job. So essentially, what people are demanding out of their jobs as well is prayas, is pleasure.
Mm.
Because if prayas isn't there, they don't want to carry on. And I've been there many times myself, where I've been teaching in certain places, and at times I've enjoyed it, but other times, especially when it comes to times for marking exams, and you have, over 100 exams to mark, that's when I think, okay, I think this job isn't for me anymore. But then, of course, when I'm back in the classroom, then I absolutely love it. If Shreyas is what's important, then does that mean it's a goodness? I should just translate these words as well. If Shreyas is important, goodness, and we know that what we're doing in our profession is perhaps a noble thing to do, is a decent thing to do, is an appropriate thing, should we then, if it's not pleasurable, then should we just carry on with it? Or in the day and age that we're in, is it legitimate to then just change job? And if so, then how much of that adhyatmic or spiritual side are we then cultivating, where we're then being able to be detached?
Sorry, Dee, should I?
Please,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think the problem often arises because we want the job to do something which actually should be from our inner being, right? And there is this need these days that I want that cool job, so everyone will kind of put a like on my Instagram thing. We want to show how perfect our life is, right? And so there's always this thing that oh, those in the public space, an actor, an author, this is such a cool job. There are lots of boring things on that side as well, right? And a lot of whether you truly get joy and meaning out of your job is actually not about the job. It is how we are inside. The true conversation of dharma is actually internal, right? I have met, we travel, a great deal. We try and travel as locals wherever possible. You meet, I've met people who are cleaning temples whose faces are like, I am cleaning the court of the Lord. I am not just a cleaner, right? Whereas I can meet someone who's an actor who you think that, my God, what an awesome life he has. Who's like, his lights are irritating. And you can't imagine the blinding light in acting. I know it sounds small, but actually I've heard many actors complaining about that their eyes feel disturbed all the time, right? Or the fact that we love, many think that it's so cool to get attention, and those actors say, I can't even lead a normal life. If I lose my temper at someone, I can't afford to. God knows who's recording it and what they'll present it as. You can't even have the pleasure of digging your nose, for example. There is pleasure in that. If you want to see the negatives, no matter what you see, you will find negatives. If you want to see the positives, you will find it. The choice really is yours. It's a classic thing, right? That, someone can just say, I'm just cutting stone, right? And kya hai, bas hathoda hai, maar raha hu. Someone can say, I'm creating a murti of God himself or the goddess herself. Think of the pleasure in that. It's what you feel inside, right? Someone who's making a road can say, you know, ये क्या करना है, बस star लगाना है. Someone can say, if I don't do this right, someone could have an accident. 5 years later, someone could die because I didn't do my job well. Now that's about who you are inside, right? When you're writing, you could have a thought, who will read, who will not read. Most writers, the books don't get read. When I was writing my first book, it was rejected by everyone. I still started writing my second book even before my first book was released. And the thought in my mind was, I'm getting so much joy from this. I don't care what others think of it. And then it comes back down to what is there in the Bhagavad Gita, what Lord Krishna told us. Karmanyavadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. You do your karma without bothering about the fruits, and you'll actually find joy in it. It's not so much about the job, it's about you inside, the conversation inside, and finding your swadharma and being in alignment with it. Dee, if you want to add anything.
Oh, yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you. It's about your inner architecture. A couple of days back, Rishi, Amish and I had a wonderful session with Swami Mukundanandaji, who's written this beautiful book on mind management. And we had our book and, his book together. We had this, it was an amazing session. And Swami Mukundanandaji's book contrasts Helen Keller with Elvis Presley. Helen Keller, a lady who, when she was a child, 1.5 year old, she got an infection, which made her blind as well as deaf. We all know how she led the rest of her life. She called life an exciting business. And there, Swamiji contrasts Helen Keller with Elvis Presley, who had the world at his feet. He had everything, but he was unhappy every moment of his life. So it's about your inner architecture.
Yes. In fact, I remember a colleague saying to me that the happiest people he'd ever come across were some of the children in the slums in South America.
In Mumbai as well.
And at the same time, you can find some really successful people who are also happy, because you find them very interestingly just detached from the money, everything. That it's, they find joy in their work so much. It is actually all about you. It is about your internal conversation. You have that in place, you'll find joy wherever you are.
Very much. I mean, it is the angle of how you look at things, and therefore, do you look at the glass half empty or half full? In more recent times, particularly over the years, and
so in my case, it has become empty. I'll fill some more water. Sorry.
So yeah, in more recent times, even for myself, I've started to look at things from a half full perspective. And I think, certainly when you have that angle, when you have that mentality, essentially it's the lens that you're looking at the world through. So then you're always, like you said, if you're having to lay a road, look at the positive aspects of it. But does this mean then that if we're to always look at the positives, then essentially because if we do decide to change jobs, we change jobs and careers because of a certain sense of dissatisfaction. And so we want certain personal growth, personal development. If we have a half full perspective, and then we gain contentment with the job that we're doing, does that not potentially limit us then? Because then we'll never want to leave a job, because we'll never need that growth. These are things that I've grappled with over the years, and I haven't come out with an answer. So that's why I thought I'd share it with yourselves.
There is a conversation that is there in the 4th book of the Ramchandra series, which I'm writing right now, where Ravan speaks of the value of grief, right? And it's and I'm not saying it's an answer. It's just, in the Indian way, it was always about, you explore philosophies and then find what works for you. And Ravan is grief-stricken in my series, in the Ramchandra series. He's suffered a lot. He's angry with life, and he has this thing that if you find that most people who are completely happy are those who are in the moment all the time, right? And that can give you joy. That is good, right? But what if what you want from life is not happiness but greatness, right? And is it that if you want greatness, you have to be fundamentally unhappy with where you are, because that's what forces you to keep striving, right? And of course, the person he's speaking to looks at Ravan and says, like unspoken, like, do you really think you're great? So Ravan is self-reflective enough to say that I don't mean great as in good great. Great, just someone who has a big impact on the world, positive or negative, right? And is it that if you're fundamentally satisfied with life, you may not have a big impact on the world because you're happy where you are, right? But if you want to work hard so that you have an impact, does that come from a place of you're not happy where you are, a place of dissatisfaction? So is there a choice, essentially? That's a question he asks. Is there a choice between happiness and greatness? You have to pick one of these two. You can't have both, right? And there is another perspective that will come later, that is the true thing that we are looking for happiness, or is it peace? Is it mental peace? So because Lord Ram also suffers a great deal, right? He does positive great work, unlike Ravan who does negative. But no matter how much he suffers, Lord Ram is always at peace because he believes, because he knows what his purpose is and he's working on that purpose, right? So I don't know what the answer is, and I don't make, one of the things of the Indian way is that philosophies are never prescriptive. You are never treated like a child, that this is the answer. Philosophies are always suggestive. These are the thoughts. Now, what do you think? And in fact, even God himself told us that in Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna tells Arjun, right, that in the 18th chapter, I have given you knowledge most profound. Now think about it and do what you think is right. And then live with the consequences. That's a way to approach these philosophies. Maybe this is a thought I want to leave with the fourth book. Is there a choice between happiness and greatness? Can you not have both? But you could possibly have peace, mental peace with greatness, if you are in alignment with your Sodharma.
Okay, you give me something to think about. I'm going to share in a moment. I would like just Bhavnaji.
So you talked about changing jobs, frequently changing jobs. Are you running away from, or are you running towards something? If you are running away, then why are you running away? What are your reasons for running away? Have you thought through the reasons for why you're running away? If you're running towards, then what are you running towards? And why are you running towards whatever you're running towards? It is so complex. You have to ask these questions, because the same thing can be right for you and the same thing can be wrong for you. It boils down to your own self-understanding, your motives, your innermost motives. My husband and I had a very dear friend, a brilliant man who's no more, brilliant man who kept changing jobs. And I will never forget one particular job he changed because he didn't like being on the 17th floor. I will, it blew my mind. I don't want my office on the 17th floor. The 17th floor doesn't suit me. And he quit. So you have to have coherent and not incoherent reasons for whatever you do in life.
And the fact that there are various aspects to life, there will be ups and downs. Those are realities one has to understand. That's a part of life. And in fact, if you are, you'll find that groups that are too privileged, where there's no real problems, they invent problems for themselves, right? It's like one of the things that, I'm living in London now, and Didi and I were talking the other day, but many of us Indians don't get the most privileged generation in human history, which is the young Western youth, especially in the US. The privileged among them. Right? It is the most privileged generation in human history. I mean, what more can they want? And the per capita violence is the lowest ever. Material comforts beyond even divine imagination 150 years ago. And yet it is among the angriest generations in history. The thing that we were talking about is, what are they angry about? I can understand someone, who's stuck, poor chap, in a civil war in the Middle East, a youngster out there, someone living in a slum. One can understand anger with, what are these guys angry about? Why are they so angry? And so it again boils down to this, that a lot of the conversation is inside. It is not about the reality of the world. And also, one of the things that you have to accept, the world does not owe you a bed of roses. There will be ups and downs in life. That is what makes life life. Grief, happiness, these things are a part of life, and we have to learn to manage them.
Very much. I often find that we can keep complaining and getting frustrated in life about things, and what is the purpose of such frustration? It is, as I see it, when people express their complaints and frustration. I mean, I've known people who, in their old age, they're still complaining. I'm thinking, what an utter waste of life that has been. You've lived where constantly there's frustration, there's complaint. With this, almost there's a sense of, I think there's this implicit or unconscious sense of, one day, with enough frustration, with enough complaining, I'll be able to fix the world. The world will never be fixed. So really, it's a case of, why not live life free from that as much as possible? So as you say, these people who are frustrated, I look at them and I think, they're not really frustrated with the outside world. That's almost like an excuse. It's a way of putting a plaster on their inner problems, their inner sense of discord. That ekagrata, that kind of togetherness that they need within, is what really they need to establish first. And then, in fact, if they want to address the world and its issues, they'll be able to do it from a more yuked place.
Right.
Where they'll be able to see with clarity actually what needs to be addressed, and with a sense of maturity rather than reactionary. And most people they don't act, they react. That's the way I look at it, because they're not looking at the situation in the present moment. It is merely programs of the mind just coming into play, and they're reacting. Well, so many things to talk about, but I have to now limit. So going back to just one quick point there, and then I'm going to throw a question out from one of the members of the audience. So the issue about, when you said happiness and then you said about peace, I do quite like the word contentment, santosha. So in a sense, here's something to share with you, to get your thoughts on. Can we reconcile? How do we reconcile? And we see this, I think, in the Bhagavad Gita, with this sense of santosha, sense of contentment, and sense of just accepting, from a bhakti perspective even, the will of the divine. From a non-bhakti perspective, even just accepting the order, the flow, the rita. And the feel within that some change needs to be done. Okay, I need to act to make some change happen. Okay, rather than it's unfolding as it's meant to unfold. So why do I need to do anything? Or why do I need to make a change in the world? If there's some atrocity happening in the world, not in any major way, how do we decide then whether it's a case of, this is just the will, this is the unfolding, and I'm content, I'm in the present, and this is just, I'm the witness, and I need to do something, because to do something then is rooted in desire, which for me then is contradictory to just being in a sajavasta, in just a state of being, state of stillness. So how do we then, so in short, how do we reconcile witnessing and just being, and then doing?
Good question. Yeah, Didi, you wanna attempt this? Have some thoughts too. I'd love to hear what you say.
So
I I'm sorry to put you on the spot like this. I mean, these are, I know.
No, this is a good question.
It's a very, very good question. Contentment and dynamism, how do they, how do they sit together comfortably on the same seat? A very, very significant question. I'm going to approach it in at various levels. To begin with, to talk about contentment. In the book, we have talked about, we have said that what is good for the beehive is always also good for the bee. It is not always so in the other direction. Now, are we in complete agreement with this? That what is good for the beehive is always good for the bee? Now, the answer to that depends on which beehive do I see myself belonging to. That's identity is very important. Being theoretically at the same time also aware that ultimately there is only one beehive, there's life. And we are all bees in the same mega beehive, which is life. Having said that, that realization of that Unitarian identity is, well, at least a couple of lifetimes away from us. In the meantime, which is the beehive do I identify with, and which beehive should I identify with? And then what is good for the beehive is also good for the bee becomes naturally applicable. Now, I would posit that whichever identification with whichever beehive brings you to an inner sense of calm, makes you positive, brings you in a state of harmony, is the beehive you belong to. In my youth, in my early youth, in my teenage years, I was quite identified myself with the beehive of womanhood in my teenage years. And as Amish, my brother, would attest, I was a very angry girl. I was very, very angry. I was unhappy. I would rage all the time. And I had wonderful parents. I had 3 lovely brothers. I had friends. I had comfort. I personally had a lovely life, and I was so angry and raging all the time. My identification was with the wrong beehive. Now, from my early youth, after I got married, when I subtly, without even realizing it, began to change my sense of identity and started identifying myself with alternative beehives, the beehive of marriagehood, the beehive of my family, the beehive of my Sanatan Dharma, the beehive of my country, India. It brought my inner architecture into harmony. And that is the identity that I should strive towards, even as I am striving towards in multiple lifetimes, understanding that I am a bee in one big beehive. So contentment comes from the correct identification. Whatever identification brings you to a sense of inner harmony. Obviously, these children, these elite privileged children that we are talking about in the Western world, well, I'll take away the word obvious, but it would do good for them if they were to ask themselves the question, which beehive are you identifying yourself with? Is it the wrong beehive that is making you unsettled and unstable all the time? That is contentment. As for dynamism, once you have attained contentment, it's very simple. Do whatever you can at that moment in time, whatever is in your hands. So I am in a particular situation right now. This is something I can do something about. Get up and do it. As to the larger, expanse of solving the problems of the world, I would suggest a bit of humility.
If I can just add one thing, I think Didi's answered it so beautifully. I can just add one thing to this. To all people who want to change the world, focus on actions, not on words. Talking a big game is very easy. actually do something. Not just talking and criticizing others. That's the easiest thing to do, right? Bring water to a village, or electricity to a village, or bring education to someone. Not actually just talking that, oh, children should be educated. That anyone can say. I can just tweet something. Children should be educated. Well, and then I can go back to watching Netflix. How is that causing any change? Actually earn money, contribute money, go to a village, teach, and the pleasure that you'll get out of action. Not words. Words are very easy. Action, right? It's one of the terms I learned when I came out here and I was talking to Didi, that term called virtue signaling. And you'll find that most people who do virtue signaling, you find they're actually very angry, because somewhere in their heart they know they're not actually causing any change. They know that inside. All of us are intelligent people. Because to actually cause change, you have to get your hands dirty and put your shoulder to the wheel and actually do some work. Not just talk. Actually do some work. Some constructive work.
Yeah, in fact, both of you have now just reminded me of a verse that you said earlier on, Amishji, which is, karmanyavadakaraste mapaleshu kadachana, that your entitlement is to act, but not in the fruit. So yeah, very much, Bhavnaji, like you said, that once you're in that place of contentment, once you're in the now, in the present, you do what needs to be done, and then whatever the outcome is, that's not down to you. That is whatever's to unfold. And I think usually it's people getting caught up in the outcome. Nisargadatta Maharaj, who I absolutely love, and the I am that, the world.
I am that, yeah. Tattvamasi.
I mean, that for me, for a long time, it probably remains in many ways in my kind of Guru Granth. It's just it's so profound. He in there, many people come to him and say, look, we need to fix the world, we need to change the world. He said, well, you can keep trying, but has it ever become fixed? Will it ever become fixed? First, focus on yourself. And Yogananda says the same thing. Don't leave your self-realization to the end. Do it first. And then when you act from a much better place. And
act with humility. Find your corner of the world and improve that. If all of us do that, the world will not be perfect, but it'll improve a lot more.
Yeah.
That's what, act with humility, find your corner of the world, improve that.
Start with fixing your room, your cupboard.
Correct.
Your shelf.
This whole thing is it reminds me of the criticisms against, say, for example, certain aspects of our tradition, like Advaita, where it's usually straw-manned by saying that they're so stoic that they don't really care about anything. But which is not the case. It's a case of, it's a state of being, it's a way to be, rather than the Advaitans aren't saying this is all Maya, so forget it, there's nothing worth dealing with. No. Not at all. It just reminds me of this, that it's a case of one needs to then still act. But then I guess there's that recognition that really, as Krishna says in Gita, that it's not us who are acting really. You come to that place where you recognize that Prakriti is acting, nature's acting through you.
We are a channel. And I think one of the things that comes from our philosophies and from Advaita very deeply is, if we see the divine in everything, then we find it difficult to hate someone else, and because how can you hate someone else? I mean, the divine is in there. Right? You will not see Mother Nature as a resource to be exploited. You'll see divine in the trees, you'll see divine in the river, so you'll obviously be respectful. Like, one of the things that troubles me so much in the West is this silly left-right fight, and it's almost, the hatred towards each other. And the thing which surprises me, actually, it's a pretty nice society. Most Western societies, they're, material comforts. On average, the individuals I've met are nice. But where does this hatred come from? That the left has for the right and the right has for the left. And is there, if you actually see the divine in others, And that's just a different manifestation of the divine. Of course, I might disagree with some of the views. That's okay. We'll find some meeting ground. We'll work together, right? If the seeing the world in binaries is what ends up causing most of the problems, and then you not realizing actually you have a pretty good society. It's not actually the many Western society. It's only when we come from abroad we see, yaar, kyun complain kar rahe ho itna? It's actually quite a nice place, right? Uh, that philosophy is very important. The inner calm, seeing divine in others. You stop these silly fights which actually just make things worse.
It's true. And in fact, you're right that the whole thing of looking at things in binaries is a very limited and myopic way of that is not life. That's a very modernist type of, black and white, yes or no, on and off. Whereas life is a spectrum, and all facets of life are spectrums. We're creating essentially models to try and understand the world. And the world isn't a very poor model is one with binaries. It is a spectrum, and I think the Indian tradition has recognized this.
Yeah.
The fact that dharma is relative. It isn't just you've got to do it this way or that way. It's about it is relative and it's contextual.
It's about you. It's about the age. It's about the context. You take all of those into account. It's not simplistic. It's not black and white. That's what makes dharma so complex and so beautiful and a wonderful way to organize society. One of the things I say which actually don't get, and I don't think we realize at times how special India is. We are the only pre-Bronze Age culture that is still alive, right? And the horrific invasions we suffered, a lot of it has been airbrushed out of our history, so we don't know, right? But as Will Durant had said, perhaps the bloodiest story in human history was the Turkic invasions of India, right? The first what we call the Delhi Sultans, and then the Mughals, and then the European invasions came after that. Tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people were killed. Thousands of our temples were destroyed. Tens of our universities were burnt to the ground. All this suffering and all this, this pain and memory in our collective consciousness. And yet, India is relatively among the least violent places in the world. And yet, when we became independent, we chose that we will treat everyone equally, we'll be secular, right? That we are relatively peaceful with each other. India is the only country in the world where a large number of Shias and Sunni Muslims actually live in peace with each other. Per capita violence is actually in the lowest quartile in India. Any society which suffers such humongous violence for so long normally becomes, it's because suffering does that to you. You get so angry. And yet India is relatively peaceful, relatively decent, despite 1,000 years of the worst genocide ever recorded in human history. The reason for that is our core philosophies. That is intuitively there in all Indians, which is why it is worth exploring, which is why it's worth spreading to the world. It's one of the things that sometimes when one meets Western left and right hating each other, what are you guys so angry about? Why are you angry? What have you suffered? Chill, calm down, right? And there's a lot from our ancestors that we can learn that is actually applicable. That if Indians, after suffering so much, are still a relatively calm society. The most violent city in India varies between Mumbai and Bangalore. It's 1/10 the violent crime rate of a New York or Boston. And our police force is desperately undermined. Our judiciary, we know it's paralyzed. Any criminal knows they'll never get punished in India through the legal route. And yet the society is relatively calm. So it's not about the police force or the system. The society itself is not violent. The society itself tends to help each other. We are relatively, for the amount we've suffered, we are an astonishingly decent society. And that comes from our philosophies that animate us.
Interesting. Oh God, conversations really could go on because there's a lot
Yes,
of.
but I think we're at the
That's right. But
border already.
you're right. I mean, dharma itself. You mentioned in the beginning about the state really kind of having such an important position in this in the West. If we look at the whole concept of dharma and Raja Dharma, for example, one of my master's subjects, my master's major was Hindu jurisprudence. So the whole area of dharma, was at the forefront. And when we look at Raja Dharma, it's not about imposing from the state. It's about society. It's about making sure everything's in check, but stepping back and just almost just dealing with issues if they need to arise. But essentially, at the local levels, there's a sense of self-regulation, and that that maturity then that comes with an individual sense of responsibility, because when a sense of responsibility goes and it's put on someone else above to then dictate it down, individuals, they can feel that they can do anything they want. Take children, for example. The moment they know that they have to, at least this is from my experience, I don't have any, but just I'm a teacher, I've seen this all for years. But when they feel that they can just do what they want because someone will put them in check, it doesn't give them that maturity. And I remember a friend of mine once who had 3 daughters, and she went to the supermarket, and she said, right, today, here's the budget, and you 3 are gonna go and do the shopping for the week. So they were excited, and they thought they'll just get their crisps and chocolates and other things. And then the eldest one said, oh, hold on, if we're going to eat properly for lunch, we need to get this dinner for this. Their whole outlook changed because the responsibility was on them. And this is what I feel, dharma, because it is that sense of you have to work it out for the greater good. It does mature you.
No doubt. No doubt.
We shall wrap up. I'm going to just throw one question in, because just out of respect to the crowd, to the audience, it says, how do we know when we are spending too much time thinking about dharma, explaining it, mentally understanding it, versus getting on with it? So knowledge versus practice. Signals that Bhavnaji spoke about. This was we had this conversation earlier on, so I don't know to what extent we'll remember the details of this.
But I think Didi might. Didi, you wanna?
You will know. You can fool the whole world, but you cannot fool yourself. You know that you're not actioning the books that you're reading and the things that you're doing and the sermons that you are reading but not digesting and actioning. You know.
Yeah. You know.
The precursor, not the precursor, well, the historical, if anything, the foundations of Dharma is this wonderful idea that we've lost, sadly. We hear people talking about Dharma, but we don't hear people talking about Rita. The Vedic idea of so Dharma being, if we look at it as microcosmic order, but Rita being macrocosmic order. And I think it's personally something that really would be lovely to bring back, because to have, like within my family, and ever since I did my Hindu jurisprudence, my Hindu law studies a long time ago, and I came to know about Rita. My professor was Professor Mensky, one of the kind of leading experts in the field. And so when he shared about the beautiful idea of Rita, and I brought it home, we started to look at life differently. And I think that's what this idea really needs to come out more. So that's a hint, Amishji, that if you in future books,
okay,
done it already, throw out some more Ritik, ideas about Rita, that'd be lovely. Because I think it would really benefit, I think, the world to start looking at this lens of just being in harmony with the cosmic order. And then it's not about the me, it's not about what I want, and it's not about rights, individual rights, but it's about duties and things like that. Yeah. Well, thank you both so very much. I've certainly loved the conversation with yourselves, and I'm hoping the audience will have taken a lot from it. You've certainly helped me think certain things through that I've been, juggling myself and discussing with others. But to have, very intelligent individuals like yourself to bounce these ideas off, that's been very beneficial for me too. So I really do thank you. So I'm just going to say one tiny bit. So this event, by the way, is sponsored by Mayora International. So that's, must share that. So thank you to you both, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.
And so
Thank you, Rishi, and thank you, Mayura International.
Yeah, thank you, Rishi. Thank you, Mayura International. And I hope you guys like the book whenever you read. Thank you.
And thank you, Harish.